destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Monday, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, 2025. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America. On the program today, Todd Tucker
of the Roosevelt Institute. Director
of Industrial Policy and Trade. Also on the program today, after meeting with John Voight, Trump vows to tariff foreign films or U.S. films or nobody knows but 100%. Israeli cabinet approves a plan for indefinite occupation and maybe war in Gaza. Meanwhile, Trump regime signal clone that they used to archive their illicit messaging has been hacked.
What?
Fear not. It took over 15 minutes to do so. Progress on the Republican One Big Beautiful Reconciliation Bill grinds to a halt. Meanwhile, Governor Abbott signs Texas voucher bill in a bid to undermine public schools. 15% of USDA employees have been pushed into early retirement. Staffing shortages have Newark air traffic controller warning against flying into that airport. Trump administration starts canceling NEA grants and slashes research into LGBTQ health. Maine shuts down the Trump regime's attempt to punish Governor Mills by ending 170,000 Maine student school lunches. DOJ accuses Aetna, Humana, and others of Medicare Advantage kickback scheme. We found the waste and fraud. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us. It is
Fun Day Monday.
Fun Day Monday. Now, I didn't even headline the part about Donald Trump wants to reopen Alcatraz because we know that's not going to happen, and he's just a moron. Yeah. We'll talk about it later in the program.
Do you think he just saw some old movies and Alcatraz was in the back of his mind or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. It's that generation's sort of imaginative.
It's an island. Because remember, he wanted the moat remember his idea for the moat at the border with alligators and crocodiles? He thinks like a 12-year-old.
When did he announce the Alcatraz thing?
Sunday.
Okay, here's my theory.
Okay.
John Voight goes to Mar-a-Lago. He's there with his agent.
Yeah. Hollywood Kingmaker, John
They're
Voight.
talking about films. Mm-hmm. And how production has, in other places. But they start talking about the movie Alcatraz.
Uh-huh.
And then Trump issues both those edicts, 100% tariff.
That must be it.
There's no doubt in my mind. I mean, there's no way he knows anything about Alcatraz other than there was a movie about it. And it was so tough to get out.
Do you think he did the tour?
Was that with Andy Dupre? And he's like, he gets out there and Morgan Freeman and that. Oh, no, that's the different one.
That's the
Shawshank. Okay.
A new executive order. Reopen Shawshank.
Reopen.
See if there's not water out it they could dig out with a spoon.
And what about The Sting? Wait again. Let's do that again.
You lost me on that one. Yeah.
You don't know what the Sting is?
I've heard the name of the film.
It's like the Green Hornet.
Yeah. But not the bad one with the Seth.
This is where I just sort of stare off into the distance and feel my life force fading away as I just pass on into the night. You don't know what the Sting is? God, man.
Dude, I mean, it's from
There's
1973.
so much I would love to know about being a 21-year-old girl.
Oh, God. I'm not going to make it through this. I'm not going to make it through the next 4 years. It's just not going to happen.
All right. Well, thanks for the heads up.
Everybody be prepared. Please. Donald Trump sat down for a wide-ranging meeting with, what's her name, Kara Welker?
Kristen Welker.
Kristen Welker on NBC News. We're going to play a bunch of clips from it because it's there's a lot of insanity there. I don't know if it's actual insanity or what, but it's becoming increasingly clear that he just there is a method to his madness, and he avoids things that he doesn't want to talk about by blaming other people or talking about his lawyers, and then everything else he talks about, clearly he just talks to 4 or 5 or 10 people and just parrots what they're saying, but doesn't know what they mean beyond what he's just said. So, it's like he gets these talking points that resonate with him, but he's not reasoned them out. So he can't go any further than those, and they sound insane when he says them.
Yeah.
And we'll get to a lot of these things over the course of the show. But here is Trump. Again, we saw on camera when Stephen Miller, they were in the White House, in the Oval Office, and there was a press gathering. There's a lot of people in there, and Stephen Miller is like announcing to the president that they won the Supreme Court case about Abrego Garcia 9-0, when in fact it was the opposite. And
but isn't that the declare victory no matter what thing? Like, if we're looking at Stephen Miller as almost Roy Cohn reincarnate, it's the just be strong and wrong and break things and just declare victory no matter what.
Ever since he stopped spray painting his head, he's really gotten better. All right, let's go.
So let's talk about this, because obviously you've had a back and forth with the Supreme Court. In a 9-0 decision, the Supreme Court directed your administration to facilitate the return. You've talked about this in the past of Omar Abrego Garcia from a prison in El Salvador, whose deportation your administration called an administrative error. You said in a recent interview you could bring him back, but you won't. Are you defying the Supreme Court, sir?
No, I'm relying on the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, who's very capable, doing a great job, because I'm not involved in the legality or the illegality. I have lawyers to do that, and that's why I have a great DOJ. We have a great one. We had a very corrupt one before. Now we have a great one. And they're not viewing the decision the way you said it. They don't view it that way at all. They think it's a totally different decision.
Well, you say you have the power to bring him back, though. Your attorney general says, quote, that's up to El Salvador. Just to put a fine point on this, do you have the power to bring Abrego Garcia back as the Supreme Court?
Well, I have the power to ask for him to come back if I'm instructed by the attorney general that it's legal to do so. But the decision as to whether or not he should come back will be the head of El Salvador. He's a very capable man.
Well, and your attorney general has said the issue is with that word facilitate. Will you seek clarification from the Supreme Court? Do you need to go back to the Supreme Court?
We may do that. I was asking about that. We may do that.
Your Secretary of State says everyone who's here, citizens and non-citizens, deserve due process. Do you agree, Mr. President?
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know.
Well, the Fifth Amendment says
I don't know. It seems it might say that, but if you're talking about that, then we'd have to have 1 million or 2 million or 3 million trials. We have thousands of people that are some murderers and some drug dealers and some of the worst people on earth. But some of the worst, most dangerous people on earth. And I was elected to get them the hell out of here, and the courts are holding me from doing it.
But even given those numbers that you're talking about, don't you need to uphold the Constitution of the United States as
I
president?
don't know. I have to respond by saying again, I have brilliant lawyers that work for me, and they are going to obviously follow what the Supreme Court said. What you said is not what I heard the Supreme Court said. They have a different interpretation.
Is anyone in your administration right now in contact with El Salvador about returning Abrego Garcia?
The interesting thing here is that he's just playing so dumb. And he's not this dumb. He knows. I'm deferring to my lawyers as if he's like as
if he's on trial.
Well, first of all, he's not the client of the DOJ. Let's make that clear. It's supposed to be independent.
But that's
the
how he used
DOJ attorneys were the ones who went into court and said we screwed up, and on multiple occasions when it came to Abrego Garcia. But this whole idea, like, I don't know if I need to follow the Constitution. This is pretty basic stuff. Let's cut to his attorney advising him whether or not he should take this vow.
This is not privileged because it was on camera, yeah.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States.
And will, to the best of my ability.
And will, to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
We didn't see if he had his fingers crossed or if his attorney. I don't know if that was his attorney disguised as the Spy v. Spy character from the old Mad magazine, I think it was.
Carmen Sandiego next to him.
You say the Supreme Court said that, but Pam Bondi told me the Supreme Court gave me a gold star, so I don't know.
He said that in the interview. I will do it if the Attorney General tells me to. No, dude, you tell it if the Supreme Court tells you to.
Well, I'm going to throw her under the bus before it's me. She should go to jail if she's wrong.
So he's been saying, I don't know. We picked up on this tick. He's picked this up, I think, in particular after his court cases, right? He's one step away from slipping up and saying, I plead the fifth, because that's how he's acting. He's acting like the Department of Justice is his personal lawyers, and that he's sitting in front of a judge being questioned, because that's what he's been doing over the past 4 years.
I don't remember. Maybe check with my lawyer.
I do not recall.
Trump denied knowing that they were using undocumented Polish workers to clear asbestos at a Trump tower.
What? I'm shocked.
This is something he's
Are you kidding?
doing
That's
his
probably.
entire
Wait, who was there? Is that legal? I don't know.
Do you think that the President of the United States should know what the Constitution says?
Well, look, if everybody knew, you wouldn't need experts.
I'm sorry to be a coastal elite about it, but I do feel like perhaps that base level of knowledge might be important.
Well, whatever. Move on. Let's talk about something else.
Sorry to be such a bitch.
Oh my God.
This is boring. We got to do hotels and stuff.
You've got blood coming out of everywhere.
Yeah.
In a moment, we're going to be talking to Todd Tucker, political scientist and director of industrial policy and trade for the Roosevelt Institute. First, a couple of words from our sponsors. It is spring. We're getting a lot of rain over this past week, and
stinks.
Things are going to explode. Now is the time to go out and plant.
Actually, it doesn't stink because then we can grow beautiful trees.
That's right. Look at Emma.
Getting on the right page.
There you go. You buy beautiful trees and beautiful flowers. And where do you get them? You get them at Fast Growing Trees.
Yep.
Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online nursery in the U.S. They have thousands of different plants and trees and shrubs and grasses and over 2 million happy customers. They got every plant or tree or shrub that your yard could want. They got fruit trees. They got privacy trees. They got shade trees. They have ornamental trees. They got shrubs. They got privacy shrubs. They got like fruit-bearing shrubs. what's the name of that? They got some type of berry. Wolfberry. That's the one. I'm always looking for, like, if I was going to plant a berry bush, which is the one that I would do post-apocalyptic. And that apparently, the wolfberry is the one I think it's the wolfberry.
It's good for that?
I think it has a lot of it's like one of the superfoods.
Oh, cool.
And also, pine nut trees, whatever. Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to get your dream yard. You order online, you get your plants delivered directly to your door in just a few days without ever leaving home. Their Alive and Thrive guarantee ensures your plants arrive happy and healthy. They do a great job in their packaging. You don't have to spill dirt all over your car. Also, you don't go to a big box store and find that they got like maybe 2 types of apple trees or, one peach tree, 1 plum tree. Fast Growing Trees has an incredible array of all these different types of fruit trees and plant trees. Plus, they got experts that will help you about your soil type, your landscape design. They'll tell you what growing zone you're in. They have a resource center that's full of tips and advice from experts. It makes it all super easy. Fast Growing Trees has the best deals, up to half off on select plants and other deals. Listeners to our show get 15% off your first purchase when you use the code majority at checkout. That's an additional 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com. Use the code majority at checkout, fastgrowingtrees.com. Code is majority. Now's the perfect time to plant. Use majority to save today. Offer valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions may apply. Also, sponsoring the program, I just got a big hit with some pajamas I gifted somebody.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. I have all sorts of Cozy Earth stuff now. I got sheets. I got towels. I got my favorite hoodie and the only pair of joggers I've ever worn. They are great, all from Cozy Earth. I want to thank Cozy Earth for sponsoring this episode. You can prioritize sleep, prioritize you, because every great day starts with a restful night. Sleep better with Cozy Earth. Go to CozyEarth.com. Use the code Majority Report to unlock an exclusive discount of up to 40%. Cozy Earth's goal is to help you create a sanctuary within your home, a refuge from the demands of the outside world. We understand the significance of finding comfort and tranquility in the midst of our hectic lives. Your 5 to 9 should consist of relaxation and rejuvenation, unwinding and embracing a sense of calm. Cozy Earth sheets are super breathable. They are temperature regulating, which is huge for me because I sleep very, very hot. They have a durable weave fabric that won't pelt. They're guaranteed for 10 years. They are super soft. They are made out of something called viscose, which is from bamboo. So they're also super sustainable. They got a 100-night sleep trial. You can have over 3 months to check out their sheets or their comforters. And if you're not completely in love with your bedding, you can return it hassle-free. And here is a spoiler alert. You won't do it because you're going to love it. Luxury shouldn't be out of reach. Visit CozyEarth.com. Use our exclusive code Majority Report, one word, Majority Report, for up to 40% off Cozy Earth best-selling sheets, towels, pajamas, and more. Trust me, you will not regret it. That's CozyEarth.com. Code is Majority Report. If you get a post-purchase survey, tell them you heard about Cozy Earth from the Majority Report with Sam Seder, and you will find that sanctuary awaits at Cozy Earth. And I'm telling you, those PJs, they will not pill.
I'm trying not to spoil, but I got another pair for somebody for an upcoming holiday.
Oh, yeah, nobody will figure that out.
Okay, yeah.
There's no upcoming holiday that says somebody might want pajamas.
I hope my mom's not listening.
That really helped.
We need you to be Mamala of the country.
Okay.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Dr. Todd and Tucker, political scientist, director of industrial policy for and trade for the Roosevelt Institute. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. I want to welcome to the program Dr. Todd Tucker, political scientist, director of industrial policy and trade for the Roosevelt Institute. Todd, tell us, let's just start with an overview of our trade policy, maybe historically, particularly in this modern era. I mean, we can go back to Smoot-Hawley if you want, and maybe we should at least mention it because Trump's, I don't know if it's a trade policy or just like whatever he's trying to do is the most disruptive, I guess, since Smoot-Hawley. But you take it from there.
Yeah, so thanks so much for having me on, longtime member and fan. So glad to be here with you today.
Well, thank you very much. Maybe we'll give you a shofar for that.
Great.
Okay.
Good. Always love to hear that.
Yeah, so, I think you set it up well. I mean, basically, Smoot-Hawley, it was this tariff that was passed in 1930, a few years after the Great Depression started, and it's widely credited with deepening the Great Depression. It was, if you will, kind of the last gasp of a long history of U.S. protectionism. I mean, basically, from the founding till about 1930, the U.S. was relatively closed economy, did not engage in a lot of trade. And Smoot-Hawley was a huge tariff hike that was kind of the last time the U.S. engaged in protectionism at all close to this level. Over the years since, basically, Congress, in order to try to free up trade, started delegating more authority to the executive branch, to the president, to negotiate trade agreements. So this started with Roosevelt, where they did fairly modest kind of tariff reduction agreements, but then really accelerated in the 1970s when you started to see trade agreements start to cover a lot more than just tariff rates, and in fact include a lot of deregulation of things behind the border. And of course, we know sort of 1993, Bill Clinton signs the North American Free Trade Agreement, which takes sort of the complexity of trade agreements to an even higher level. And then China joins the World Trade Organization in the years after that. And so basically for many, many years, the US has been on a trajectory of liberalizing its trade to the point where now the average, before Trump came back into office, the average tariff the US was charging was around 2 to 3%, which is about some of the lowest rates that are charged by any country anywhere around the world. With Trump, and we can kind of get into the details of what he's done in the last 104 days, but we've seen tariffs go up to in excess of 10% as a minimum, which is by far the largest tariff and tax increase, if you want to call it that, in U.S. history.
I just want to get a sense of characterizing when we go into NAFTA, when there's an attempt with CAFTA, and then the TPP, the attempt on the TPP. Is it fair to characterize it as we liberalized in the sense that we relaxed things dramatically, and neoliberalized in the sort of the real Mont Pelerin style? We allowed capital to cross as if there's no borders. Mm-hmm. Labor, of course, we've had contraction. We certainly had more protectionism on the labor side, not on the capital or manufacturing side. I mean, when we say we ship manufacturing to somewhere else, we're basically letting capital just invest over there as opposed to here. And so this was a liberalization, but a very unbalanced one, it seems, within the context of the two things that you need to make stuff, which is labor and capital.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And in fact, I mean, the free trade theory that economists like to cite predicts that as countries liberalize trade, you would start to see an equalization of incomes and wages over time. And we absolutely have not seen that. In fact, precisely because the structure of the trade agreements that you're addressing, deals like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the North American Free Trade Agreement, far from sort of converging incomes across countries, in fact led to sort of the Mexico becoming sort of a permanent low-wage reservoir for U.S. manufacturing, which was very convenient whenever sort of workers in the U.S. would try to unionize. Companies could sort of say, well, hey, there's 0 tariffs across the U.S.-Mexico border. We can relocate there. And so that, as a consequence, that squashed a lot of unionization drives. At the same time, through these trade agreements, companies like Monsanto, like Citibank, were able to demand a whole set of special treatment behind the border in places like Mexico, so that countries, rather than sort of building up their own administrative state capacities, were, basically stuck in a deregulatory, low regulation equilibrium. And then companies got even special rights to litigate and sue countries if they would try to go against some of those norms and standards. So it was really a way to sort of empower capital at the expense of labor and the expense of communities across the U.S. and frankly also abroad.
And lastly, just also so we have a clear characterization of these trade agreements, they seem to, in many ways, empower a third party. Assuming there was a bilateral trade agreement between Mexico and America, there's a third party that is empowered, which overruns the sovereign. And you're talking about that in terms of special deals for Monsanto in Mexico, but the investor dispute system, I can never remember ISDS or I can't remember exactly. Yes, that basically empowers corporations to strip a certain amount of sovereignty and will from the nations that are involved in this agreement, so that they can't act on behalf of what their countries ostensibly want, protection from this chemical, or, saving the trees or the spotted owl for that matter, if it costs these corporations projected revenue.
That's right. So, if a company sort of comes in and says, hey, we invested in Argentina or we invested in Malawi, kind of expecting this low regulation environment that you committed to when you signed up for the trade agreement. If you start ratcheting that back up, maybe because you had a financial crisis or you had some type of economic collapse, or you just want to engage in industrial policy to develop your country, develop your country's economy, go beyond just exporting primary materials, raw commodities, and instead go up the value chain, well, then we have basically the authority to be like what we in the U.S. would call private attorneys general, go around the government and directly litigate against the government for those lost future expected profits. And so it was a very useful disciplining device for big companies and for capital to keep countries in line for much of that neoliberal period over the last several decades.
So this neoliberal regime, from my perspective, and I think from, I would imagine probably from yours at the Roosevelt Institute, but also from the perspective of workers as opposed to capital, not a great deal. Let's talk about tariffs. Is just the implementation of tariffs without any perceived rhyme or reason, is that the opposite of that? Or is that just something completely different? Like, what would be the opposite of that, of that regime, trade regime?
Well, so I think that there is the smart alternative to that regime, and then there's the dumb alternative, right? So we know a little bit what the smart alternative was, and it actually included some tariffs, and that was called the Biden administration. I don't know if a lot of your listeners know, but in 2023 and 2024, we saw the biggest expansion of manufacturing construction in this country that we've seen since we were keeping the statistics. 900 factories built up or retrofitted across the country, 60,000 infrastructure projects built up. And, there was a tariff component to that, which was basically saying that if we're going to be investing trillions of dollars in the clean energy industry and the semiconductor industry, we definitely don't want those to be overwhelmed next month by sort of a flood of Chinese imports, because China's building up its capacity in a major way, which has actually helped to develop its country, and that's good, but really gone so far in excess of what the domestic economy needs that they sort of don't have any choice but to try to export that to the rest of the world. So, as part of Biden's industrial policy, they did have tariffs, but it was a backstop. It was really like the complement to the industrial policy and the subsidies and the R&D and the sort of planning support that they were given. So there were tariffs. And in fact, they were in some cases quite large. So you had 100% tariffs on electric vehicles. And just to give people a sense, typically the consensus among economists is that a 50% tariff basically shuts off trade. And so 100% tariff, at that point, you're really making a point that you want to have an infant industry protection for that electric vehicle industry to allow Detroit and the automakers and the UAW to transition to that new system. So that's the kind of smart way of doing it. The dumb way is that you sort of from hour to hour announce different tariff rates that are seemingly drawn from the air with no clear rationale, where you're imposing tariffs, of anywhere from 20 to 150% on countries, some of whom we have trade deficits with, some we have trade surpluses with, some that are tiny developing nations that wouldn't be able to buy a lot of our products anyway, like Lesotho, that came in for a 50% tariff, African kingdom landlocked by South Africa, all the way to 20% on the European Union, with whom we actually do have some lasting sort of trade problems. So there's really kind of no rhyme or reason, which, and there's been any number of rationales that different folks in the administration have tried to use to sort of, as they call, sane wash this policy, but it really is just a pure chaos.
But even if there was some rationality, it seems to me, and tell me if this metaphor makes sense, that, if I'm planting a seed and I'm trying to grow a seedling, I'll put maybe a little cover over so it'll be humid in there. I'll put in, a plant food. I will try and grow it. Those are all the sort of proactive things I'm doing. The plastic cover around it is to protect it, just in case like it's not too windy or, nobody's going to come, a little mouse is not going to come by and eat it. He's just putting the protective cover on there over basically dirt without any seeds.
Yep.
And the tariffs are there to protect something, but the protect thing doesn't exist yet. Well, and so there's no proactive part to grow whatever he's trying to grow.
It's almost worse in that he's putting salt in the area where there should be a seed, because they are firing the probationary employees that were supposed to be implementing the CHIPS Act, which would have been somewhat of an industrial policy.
That's absolutely right. I mean, that's a great point. I mean, and in fact, they're going out doing threatening criminal prosecutions against the career civil servants that are managing some of these industrial policy programs. So, even though there's a ton of litigation now going against both sort of Trump's rollback of the CHIPS and Science program and the Inflation Reduction Act, hopefully, I think that those will ultimately be successful because it's so brazenly illegal what the administration is doing. But on some level, it won't matter. By the time that you've sort of frustrated these programs and undermined confidence in them, then banks that might go in as co-lenders don't want to do that. Communities and mayors that want to build up programs are going to hold back. And so once you've created that level of uncertainty, there's almost no level of tariff rate that you could impose that would make it worthwhile to invest in something that might take 5, 10, 20 years to bear profit. And, even if you were going to sort of build up everything using only tariffs, which would be a really bad idea, but even if you were going to try to do that, companies would need to know that those were going to be in place for a decade or more. And there's just no sense on the day-to-day shifting rationale of why they're doing the tariffs or what level they're going to be, that's something that companies could rely on.
Let's look at this clip because, nobody rational seems to be able to explain. Like Scott Bessant, they send him out there to explain this thing, and it looks like, honestly, like someone threw into the deep end of the pool with a 200-pound weight, and he's just trying to tread water. The only person who seems to know is
Peter Navarro?
Well, I was going to say Ron Rivano.
Ron Vara. The expert that came up with this equation.
His imaginary self. What is it? What do you call it?
The wonk alter ego?
Yeah,
right.
His alter ego in the book who validates all his points.
And why did he leave that paper trail? But anyway, go on.
Apparently that's how, my understanding is that Don Jr., or no, it was Kushner, was looking for a trade expert, saw this book, read the book, said it makes sense, and then Navarro became the trade guy, and it was all based upon him in a conversation with himself. But here is Trump being asked in this Kristen Welker interview on Meet the Press yesterday, what, how do you measure success in this? And here's Trump's perspective.
Well, prices are already going up on some popular items. Tires, strollers.
This is such a dishonest interview already. Prices are down on groceries. Prices are down for oil. Prices are down for all energy. Prices are down at tremendous numbers for gasoline. And let me tell you, when you have...
Pause it. I just want to say also, gasoline and oil, we're basically talking like very, like they're derivative products of each other. So, and the egg prices, they keep saying egg prices are going down. I don't see any evidence of that. Like I'm looking at the average cost of eggs and they're basically maintaining, if not creeping up slightly. I don't know what he means by groceries, but they keep repeating this. But
it's an old-fashioned word.
Putting that aside, because, there is I would say 1,000 miles off the coast of LA, we get a sense of what's about to happen. But continue.
What he did, he spent like a stupid person, which he was, but he spent like a very stupid person. And that was bad for inflation. But what really killed us with inflation was the price of energy. It went up to $3.90, even $4, and in California, $5 and $6, right? Okay. I have it down to $1.98 in many states right now. When you go that much lower on energy, which is ahead of my prediction because I really thought I could get it down into the 250s. We have it down at $1.98 in numerous places. But when you say costs are going up, even mortgage rates are going down.
Well, but let me give you some examples. These are actual examples. So you're saying the prices that are going down, some prices are going up. Tires, strollers, some clothing in the wake of your tariffs.
That's peanuts compared to energy. Energy is 60% of the cost.
But sir, you campaigned on a promise to bring prices down on day
Well, I don't know. When you say strollers are going up, what kind of a thing? I'm saying that gasoline is going down. Gasoline is thousands of times more important than a stroller someplace.
But what do you say to Americans who say they voted for you because they want and they need relief right now?
And they're getting it.
Right now? What about those
even mortgage rates?
Different items I just
Mortgage rates are going down despite the fact that we have a stubborn Fed.
But you said dolls could cost a couple bucks more.
Maybe they might, but you don't need to have, as I said, $35. You can have 2, 3, 4 and save a lot of money. We don't need to feed the beast.
I guess you're talking about this transition cost. How long should people expect that transition to last, Mr. President?
I can't tell you that. I can tell you that we're making a lot of money. We're doing great. Again, we're losing more than $5 billion a day. $5 billion a day. You don't talk about that. And right now, we're going to be at a point very soon where we're making money every day. Look.
How soon?
We were losing hundreds of billions of dollars with China.
Okay, all right. So
wait, but just five more seconds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now we're essentially not doing business with China. Therefore, we're saving hundreds of billions of dollars.
That's what I wanted to get to, because that doesn't make any sense.
Okay,
to put it mildly.
All right, so let's put aside for a moment, like gas prices are down. That is a reflection of there's no war that's ongoing that's inhibiting the price of gas like there was, when at the beginning of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, or with problems with Iran, and frankly, probably that signals that maybe those gas prices are a little bit down, upstream from a slowdown in economies, perhaps. But putting that aside, that has nothing to do with the tariffs. He's saying that we were losing $5 billion a day, and now that we're not doing business with China, we're saving a lot of money. What is he talking about?
He's probably talking about the daily trade deficit, which is sort of an obsession of his. The idea that it's somehow unsustainable if the U.S. is importing less than it's exporting. And look, a broken clock is right twice a day. There's definitely some reason to be concerned with how sustainable that is over time. But the problem is despite his obsession on this, the trade deficit actually went up under his first administration, and it's edging up now again as well. Part of both the exporting and importing side of this are important. You've got to make stuff that the world wants to buy, and it seems like Trump's going in the exact opposite direction, deregulating consumer safety, deregulating auto safety standards and others. That's not a surefire way to make inroads into the European market, into the Asian market. So he's thinking just by sort of shutting down one side of that ledger that you're somehow solving a problem. But I think the problem is he's asking Americans to make a huge sacrifice here, but without any clear vision of what ultimately that sacrifice is for. Certainly there's times in history where FDR and others have called on people to make a sacrifice, but it's usually been for a war or for another emergency or fighting the Great Depression. Here, the policy chaos is entirely a result of his own making. There's not some sort of external factor here. So he's really asking us to sacrifice for his own mistakes and his own chaos.
But he's saying that we're losing $5 billion a day because with China, because we are purchasing these products instead of making them here, I guess, theoretically. And so that money ultimately ends up in China to the tune of $5 billion a day. And he perceives that as a loss, despite the fact that a lot of those products from China end up being products that make it possible for products to be made here in this country. Like you can't, it's the packaging. There's a lot of,
it's a complex supply chain.
But there's a lot of like our productivity that is incumbent. So if you were to really break it down, it's possible we would still be losing money in that way or spending money, as he says, but it would definitely be a lot less because we're inhibiting. People are going to have to turn around and try and find a substitute for that in this country. And it could end up costing them more. And it could even come from a different country.
That's right. I mean, over the last, since the 70s, we've disentangled our supply chains so that companies like GM or Boeing that used to make a lot of their parts in-house have outsourced that first to companies in the US and then ultimately to companies overseas. That's been a long-term process. And it's one, there's pluses and minuses to that arrangement. But whatever you think about it, you can't undo it overnight. It's going to just be outright inflationary. And ultimately, what we're going to see is that a lot of U.S. companies, the manufacturers that still exist in this country, are going to be shutting down. And we've already seen that with GM and with some of the companies that have had to idle production. And so these are the very, workers and voters that Trump based a lot of his campaign promises on helping. And ultimately, we're seeing that a lot of them now are out of work or will be soon as the sort of the full impact of some of these tariffs come into display over the next few weeks.
He last week, at the end of last week, he allowed the de minimis exemption to expire, which means that goods that are under $800 are not subjected to duties and to tariffs. And there was an analysis done that showed that nearly half of those goods, that the cheap goods that are imported at that level, go to the poorest counties in the country. And you just have to think about it for a second. It's the Dollar Tree. It's even Walmart. It's the cheaper goods that kind of hold together our economy that is already so unequal with duct tape, right? That, okay, we may not have a social safety net, but you can buy something at the Dollar Tree for 99 cents or whatever. That underbelly is all Chinese products.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. And, we've had this de minimis exception for, going back to the 30s in the US. It didn't used to be a very big deal. It was the kind of thing that like maybe if, you were importing like a single tin of sardines from Spain, the idea is that it's not worth going through all the effort to clear that through customs. Let's make it easier for small scale transactions. We've seen over the last, 5-6 years, companies like Shein and Temu really develop. It's almost kind of the U.S. has created a bit of an industrial policy in reverse, where we've kind of made it a viable business model for companies to send in sort of $799 of shipments or even sort of smaller amounts. And, as you pointed out, like there are, again, pluses and minuses to that as a policy. In fact, there's been bipartisan concern in Congress over the sort of abuses of that de minimis system for a while. But this is kind of a pattern that we see. Even in areas where Trump could get legislation through Congress, and there would be an opportunity to do hearings, an opportunity to do fact finding, sort of be aware in advance of the pluses and minuses to the various policies. he's just doing it directly through executive action without any process to speak of. I mean, his tariff actions in the first administration actually went through a bit of a process that slowed them down a bit, sort of cushion the impact somewhat. This time around, he's just doing it all through executive order without any type of process at all, which is just making for really bad policy.
What is the authority in which he's doing this? Like specifically like statute, because he announced today that and to be fair, I mean, he consulted with John Voight and John Voight's manager. So,
that's due diligence.
Who am I to question? Because Voight has done some very good work in the past. But he's claiming he's going to tariff foreign films 100%. Now, it's unclear if he means like a film that is produced in France in French and we watch here with subtitles, or if he means American productions that go to a different country because it's cheaper to do it and they get incentives and whatnot. Now, with all that said, we have very large trade surpluses with the world when it comes to entertainment. That's one of the few things that we really export a lot of. But my understanding is the authority that he's using to do all these tariffs specifically says that information products cannot be tariffed.
Yeah, that's right. So all of this is under the International Economic Emergencies Authorities Act, IEEPA, and it's one of the most open-ended of many, frankly, open-ended delegations of authority that Congress has issued over the years. And so this has been in place in one form or another since 1917. It was originally called the Trading with the Enemies Act, and as you can get a sense from the title there, it was really meant to sort of address a series of like very acute emergencies, unexpected and unusual emergencies, typically that have been things like terrorism related or sort of money laundering related, that have been used in sort of a very discreet fashion to sort of sanction individuals that were involved in alleged wrongdoing, that kind of thing. It's very rarely, and in fact, since IEEPA went into effect in 1976, has never been used for broad tariffs. So this is something really where the administration is departing, and I think that it's no coincidence, because basically IEEPA, unlike some of the other parts of U.S. trade law, is basically totally subject to whatever the president says it is at any given moment. There's not any process around it, and courts have limited power to review IEEPA declarations because they're made by the president himself in his sort of personal capacity, as opposed to a federal agency. So we've seen over the years with the Roberts Court that they've tended to not like it when the EPA or other agencies use power delegated from Congress, but they've kind of put an asterisk by that for actions the president himself takes directly in sort of the foreign affairs realm. And so that is why sort of Trump and Navarro and the whole team of hawks over there have gravitated towards IEEPA to issue sort of the most sweeping tariffs. And so there's 7 different court cases right now litigating against those tariffs. I think, honestly, they are going to have a hard time convincing the courts that the tariffs are unlawful, because the statute is written in such a broad and expansive fashion. And despite many, many opportunities to revise that and dial it back, Congress hasn't. So I think that the Roberts Court, if they're sort of looking to give Trump a win somewhere so that they can give sort of a ding to him somewhere else, I think that I can actually see that as economically impactful as these tariffs are, this might be an area where they're going to let him off.
But there was a Berman amendment in 1988, is my understanding, to IEEPA that specifically says protections that were basically outside the purview of IEEPA were films, CDs, DVDs, digital publications, online communications, books, new media, et cetera, that they had some First Amendment driven protection, and you can't tariff those.
That's absolutely right. So, I mean, there is kind of this information exception based on First Amendment concerns that they wanted to, not do anything to discourage the free flow of information. Got to also think that in the context of sort of the final days of the Cold War, the U.S. sort of information exports were a huge way that they were they were sort of waging the Cold War. And so those were some of the concerns that led to that amendment. It's unclear what Trump is actually proposing here. I mean, this is very unusual. Of course, we're not in the era where films are traditionally coming back and forth over, VHS tapes anymore. So it's unclear what he's even sort of saying he is going to tariff. If it's going to be something like a digital services tax, which is like Europe is now kind of imposed on Facebook and some other companies, there's maybe a way that this could be sort of the inverse of that. But it's not going to be a traditional kind of tariff that's collected at the border. It's going to be some type of services taxation that they're going to have to invent a whole new system, frankly, to even kind of come up with how they're going to administer that. At a time when Doge and others are laying off all the government staff that would be needed to actually figure out how to do this completely new system. So there's all sorts of contradictions there.
But surely John Voight understood this and walked Trump through it. Maybe we'll have to wait until I don't know. Bo Derek comes in. Like, I'm trying to think of all the right wing luminaries that will show up at.
Randy Quaid, we were saying earlier.
Ever since Chuck Woolery passed away, I feel like our whole policy system around this has been completely willy-nilly. So what do you anticipate going forward? Because we're going to play a clip later in the program, and we had mentioned this, I think it was on Friday, or maybe it was earlier last week, that the Port of LA, obviously, like, ships get booked, but well in advance at the Port of LA. It's the biggest port, I think, in the country. It's obviously the one that is where goods from China are coming from. And they're anticipating, like, in 2 weeks, about 30 to 40% of their business to simply fall off a cliff. Like, it's just not going to be there. And then this goes through the system. Like, people, it's sort of like when New York City outlawed plastic bags. All these bodegas went out and bought as many of the plastic sacks they have because they're allowed to finish their supply. There's going to be a cushion, right? But then all of a sudden, who knows where it's going to be 5-6 weeks from 2 weeks from now. So maybe we're talking about 2 months. All of a sudden, like, there's going to be no more of this or that. It's just not going to exist in our shelves.
Yeah, I mean, so let's kind of remember back. It was almost exactly a month ago that we had "quote unquote" Liberation Day, where Trump announced sort of a whole suite of tariff measures, which we could get into the details, but basically we're like a universal baseline tariff of 10%, and then a crazy sort of mishmash of tariffs, so-called reciprocal tariffs against countries we have trade deficits with. That was April 2nd. That was put on pause till April 9th. And now has been put on pause for sort of an even further period of time until around July 8th is sort of when we'll sort of see the fate of those reciprocal tariffs. But if you look at sort of the real economy, it takes about 20 days to get a shipment from China to the U.S., about 10 days to get from sort of the ports on the West Coast to shelves across the United States. So that's about 30 days more or less. And so again, about a month ago was sort of when some of the tariffs went into effect. So we should be seeing the impact of that in the coming days. As you pointed out, shipments to the Port of LA are way down. Some of these companies like Temu that were sort of doing the small value shipments have said they're no longer going to be shipping at all to the United States and are going to be routing everything through third countries. And that's kind of a whole nother part of this story, which is that the more you create differential tariffs between different sets of countries, the more reward there is for trying to game the system in creative ways or do things like what's called transshipment, which is basically just kind of shipping something to Singapore and then reshipping it to the United States. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity for gaming the system, frankly, for criminal syndicates to get involved and sort of figuring out ways to relabel products as made from a different country than they were made in. And so there's going to be shortages. And there's going to be a lot of this kind of falsification of documents that we're going to see. So, I think that's kind of the impact that I would expect to see. We're in May, over May and June. And then I think that July deadline for the reciprocal tariffs to go into place, supposedly we're going to be negotiating over 100 trade agreements with countries around the world. at a very time where we're sort of firing the trade negotiators and the officials that are responsible for doing that for the federal government. So I don't see any way that we're going to get there, and I think that they're just going to have to ultimately punt the tariffs still further, and I think that's kind of where we get to what we're seeing is that Trump is kind of making a lot of threats, but then in a lot of cases is backing off of those threats once Wall Street and sort of big donors come in and complain. We've seen sort of on again, off again tariffs for the auto industry, where after they complained, they were sort of rolled back and made less onerous. And so there's basically a lobbying frenzy happening right now in DC for tariff exemptions, for special tariff treatments. So I think where this ends up at the end of the day, whether it's something like a total shutdown of trade or sort of a blossoming of a whole new generation of free trade agreements, it's actually hard to see. I could kind of imagine scenarios where either happens.
So it seems clear, though, that like the vision of eliminating the income tax because of the hundreds of billions of dollars that we're going to get, that's not going to happen. There's a lot of reason to believe that nobody's going to invest in building a burgeoning industry in this country to replace these things because no one can rely on this type of protectionism to exist until, like, never mind, 3 years out. Nobody's by September, this all could just be like, okay, forget it all, whatever, one big beautiful bill. We're not even going to talk about tariffs anymore. I mean, nobody knows. So there's not going to be any investment. It just sounds like we're going to have people back up. The only possible outcome, it feels like right now, is a slowdown in economic activity. Nothing else seems like rational for anybody else to do.
That's absolutely right. I mean, even under the most generous assumptions, most generous assumptions towards Trump, the maximum we could sort of collect with tariff revenue is a tiny fraction, less than half of what we could collect with the income tax. There's no viable way to replace that. As you pointed out, Sam, I mean, really what we're going to see is not sort of companies making that 5-year, 10-year investment plan on the basis of these tariffs. Instead, what they're going to do is just simply cease production, stop projects, lay off workers, furlough workers, until they get a better sense of what the policy dynamic is going to be a few weeks from now, a few months from now. And so it's really going to just lead to sort of a slowing down of economic activity, hopefully not a recession, but that could certainly happen. But especially for industrial sectors that are reliant on these kind of predictable flows of inputs into their supply chains, they're just going to be waiting and seeing and not doing major investments of the kind that we saw again in 2023 and 2024, when there was kind of a comprehensive and predictable set of policies in place.
The irony, I guess, is that everybody's going to do what Trump said at the end of that interview, which is, we're not trading with them, so we're saving all this money.
Right.
That's exactly what a lot of companies are going to be like. We're just not going to build anything or spend any money or hire anybody because that way we're not losing money.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, what companies definitely don't want to do is lose money, and so they would rather just not invest and not sell things for a while so that they're not having to sell at a loss. I mean, we're benefiting over the last few weeks of the fact that companies kind of knew that there was going to be some kind of tariff coming into place. They didn't know exactly what, but they were able to stockpile goods. And so, there's huge inventories in sort of quote unquote free trade zones across the United States, which are basically places next to custom houses where you can store goods and you don't have to remove them right away. So, U.S. consumers have been benefiting from the fact that there has been kind of that backlog of goods, but that's going to start drying up over the course of the next few weeks. And I think that's when we're going to start to see folks really take a hit in terms of the variety of goods that are available on supermarket shelves, and then for companies, the variety of inputs that they're able to get for their auto production, for their aviation production, and other sectors.
My understanding is that a lot of retail places around the country, basically, I mean, they call it Black Friday for a reason. They make all their money in that last quarter. The rest of the year is basically paying off all their expenses, but all their profit is made in the 3 weeks of the year. When do they have to start putting in orders for what they're going to have in terms of inventory? How far out do they order those things?
Well, because there's so many orders coming in from around the world at the same time, they have to get their place in the queue well in advance. So, we're looking at sort of the summer as the time when they would start to be locking in some of those orders. So that's right around, we'll sort of know, July 8th is sort of when these reciprocal tariffs go into place or not. Whether we have sort of this, again, sort of blossoming of new free trade agreements that go down to zero tariffs across the board, who knows, right? But I think it's around that time in July when companies are going to start to need to make those plans for their Christmas orders. And so if there's not a lot more certainty by then, which frankly, I think one of the only ways that there could be a lot more certainty is if Congress steps in and reasserts its constitutional authority on trade. If they do that, that might be something that would bring some more certainty to the markets. But I think short of that, if Trump continues to have this tariff toy that he can kind of play with to just generate news headlines on a day-to-day basis, I don't see that certainty being in place for the companies that need to make those 6-month plans going into the summer.
Didn't the Congress essentially cede their ability to interfere in the supposed continuing resolution, the sort of like dirty continuing resolution? Wasn't there a provision of that ceded their authority?
Yeah, it was kind of wild. I mean, under the National Emergencies Act and under some of the other tariff authorities, Congress gets an up or down vote, an opportunity to give an up or down vote to sort of disagree with the president on the existence of an emergency after a certain number of days, legislative days passing on the legislative calendar. So what Republicans did as part of the continuing resolution was freeze the passage of legislative time so that basically no days would pass. And so therefore there would not be that clock that would be ticking to give them the opportunity for the up or down vote. There's now some efforts in Congress to sort of get that clock running again and do some up or down votes. There was a vote in the Senate to suspend the emergency as it relates to Canada. That has not gotten a House vote yet. And I think that if the economic conditions continue to worsen, we will see pressure ratcheted up on both houses to exert more of a check. Frankly, if they don't exert any kind of minimal check, even as the economy is collapsing, we'll have bigger problems than just trade problems. They'll be, in fact, sort of an indication of a really severe corrosion of democracy itself.
I mean, it'll also be fascinating to see if there's any House members who are going to break from Trump. I mean, it's one thing to be a senator and do that and maybe have 4 years before you have to run for re-election. But all of these House members are looking at re-election in whatever it is, 16 months, 18 months. And Elon Musk's money there, I guess, wouldn't be deployed in that instance because Musk is hurting as much as anybody from this. But it'll be fascinating to see where this goes, or just also super tragic for a lot of people to lose their job just because of Vera, or whatever that the expert who lives in Peter Navarro's wall, I guess, his imaginary friend, imaginary scholarly friend, to be fair. Dr. Todd Tucker, a political scientist, director of the Industrial Policy and Trade for the Roosevelt Institute. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Thus completes the first half of our program. We will head into the so-called fun half with a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible.
This faux possible.
This faux pas possible. Nice. Your support keeps this show thriving and surviving, as it were. We have been suffering under the weight of the protectionism of all these Canadian podcasts, and so your support helps. I don't know where I was going with that.
Yeah, if you're a patriot.
Canada actually does have protectionism for its cultural production.
Oh, 100%.
CanCon.
Oh, no. I will tell you this.
I didn't know that.
I once shot a TV show up there for Fox Television, not news. Conan O'Brien's company bought one of my scripts, and we shot something called Beat Cops up there with John Benjamin. Now, We had shot a version in New York City. Then they wanted to shoot another one in Toronto. And I was like, it's a shot on the streets of New York. I'm not going to do it in Canada. And then 9/11 was when we were in the wake of doing that. And I'm like, okay, I'll go to Canada.
Also, it's way cheaper, is it not?
Well, it's, first of all, at that time, it was 80 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
So there was a big savings there. And you get incentives, but they say, like, characters after a certain level, I can't remember what it was, like the first 4 characters in the show could be American hires, but then the rest had to be local hires. So it would build part of the Canadian, film and TV job. So we had we brought in a couple of American actors, obviously Benjamin and I, and then we had Canadians that we had to get like these huge sort of tax benefits to it. No, this is not the Nick DiPaolo story. That was the New York version. Nick DiPaolo was not in that version. And so, yes, there's a lot of incentives. And so Vancouver has a huge industry. Toronto has a huge industry. Right. But I guess the idea, I think what Trump was trying to do is say, we want to keep those jobs in America.
Mm-hmm.
And, the way that they do it in places like in Georgia and other places around the country is offer big sort of tax incentives, I guess.
And my understanding is that the kind of season's over on that sort of stuff, that states are like Louisiana are realizing, hey, maybe this isn't really as good of an investment. It's not
bringing the economic activity that we had hoped.
Right.
I mean, I suppose there's a way of basically saying that if you, we're going to tax U.S. investment in productions that are shot overseas. But you'd also have to say, like, well, wait a second. What if the story takes place in Paris?
Oh, my God. This is going to make more green screen productions, which we definitely need more of. I mean, come on. I'm being, like, I'm not even joking if it goes into effect. I saw some joke on social media, people saying that Dune 3 is going to be shot in Cleveland now. So,
long before that happens.
I loved those like beautiful, gorgeous deserts and landscapes, but I guess sayonara to that.
Well, you just make it with AI now.
Yeah, right. I can't.
Do we really even need the actors?
That's a good point.
Anyways, folks, you can help us stay in the United States by becoming a member at jointhemajority.com. Also, don't forget Just Coffee. Fair trade coffee from the co-op in Madison, Wisconsin. You can buy the Majority Report blend. You can get a bunch of single origin coffees there. You can get big bags, little bags. You can get it ground. You can get a whole bean. And you're supporting a co-op, and you're getting great coffee and supporting their producers in Chiapas and I'm not sure what part of Africa, but check it out, justcoffee.coop. And Matt, Left Reckoning.
Yeah, Thomas Kennedy of the Why Are We Like This podcast Tucker came on to talk about Florida, including Ron DeSantis's wife scam, in which charity she is dealing with got a bunch of kickbacks from a settlement that the state of Florida reached with a company. So check that out, patreon.com/leftreckoning. We also talk about Florida Democrats and how the Trump 47 immigration crackdown is playing out in Florida, because Thomas is a immigration activist. Check that out, patreon.com/leftreckoning.
See you in the fun half. 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow. What? What is that going on? It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second.
The Majority Report.
Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.